In this video, I joined the electric revolution. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I've got some exciting news for you, but first let's clear up a couple of things. In my last video, I mentioned that I'd binned off my 2018 3 Series and I was smoking around in a horrendous, big brown, uneconomical, cheap daily driver. And unfortunately I didn't get the chance to bring that to you and show you that, but for all of those that you didn't know, it was a 2001 BMW X5 3-litre sport automatic in this lovely mahogany with a mahogany leather interior as well. And that was all well and good. I was very thirsty, 20 miles to the gallon, but it was fairly dependable apart from the odd oil leak and, you know, that sort of inkling that the gearbox might explode at any given moment, and the kind of usual stuff that comes with running a 20-year-old premium SUV that's done all of its depreciation and has a lot of miles on the clock. You know, a fairly stressful experience if you're not just popping to the shops and back. What's happened is, bought a BMW i3 for my other half. She doesn't do very many miles, and a second-hand i3 with the little 60 amp hour battery seemed like a pretty good choice because, you know, she works 4 or 5 miles away, doesn't really do much driving apart from commuting, you know, popping to the shops and that kind of stuff. So we thought we'd try an electric car, and that would be a good idea. And it was, and so much so that I more and more was looking at the futility of smoking around doing 20 miles to the gallon whilst doing very similar journeys, you know, popping to the shops, going to work and that kind of stuff. And it just really, you start to question whether it's worth it. I mean, I'm far from a environmentalist, but when you're doing 20 miles to the gallon for just pointless, mundane journeys, it just doesn't seem to stack up. So I started looking at electric cars for myself. And what I've ended up in is this 2020 MG ZS EV exclusive. Let's have a look. Yes, I know. It's a Chinese car with the MG badge put on, and that's a travesty because MG was this great British brand and everything they stand for, and they were so successful that they famously went bust in 2006 and were sold for £1. Yeah, we can keep looking back on how bad it is now that their current owners are just slapping the badge on Chinese imports, but let's forget about all that stuff. I'm not actually interested in the heritage of the brand. And, you know, I can appreciate classic MGs and what they are, but in 2020 it's not really relevant, is it? Let's focus on the product we're actually being offered now. And yeah, I know it's Chinese. The smartphone you're using to watch this video is probably Chinese made as well. So let's not worry about that too much, shall we? So what we have is, as I said, a 2020 MG ZS EV, and this particular one is in the exclusive trim, which is the top spec. It comes in 2 trim levels, Excite and Exclusive. I think the list price of this car is about 31 grand before the government grants and stuff, but nobody pays that for them. Out the door, this one was £22,500, and that includes £500 for the metallic black paint. I could have had it in white for 500 quid less, but I thought that white cars were difficult to keep clean, but yeah, black cars are just as bad, so I don't know, that was maybe the wrong decision. But I think it looks quite good in the metallic black anyway. It's also available in a pearlescent tri-coat red, which is pretty nice, or a metallic light blue, which is an exclusive colour to the EV, and you can't get the internal combustion engine ZS in that colour. And on the face of it, you get quite a lot for your money. MG's petrol engine cars are a little bit lackluster. I think you could make many arguments for buying something else. But when you look at the EV, nothing really comes close to it. But okay, you can make the second-hand versus new argument, but in terms of what you're getting for in a brand new electric car, I think it's very hard to beat. And I think this is the point at which this reborn MG is going to start to be taken seriously in the market in the UK, because they're actually offering something that differentiates them in the marketplace. They're offering a much cheaper electric car that actually spec-wise and range and capability stands up well against its competition. One thing I will say is, the interior quality is far better than I was expecting. It's going to be a deal breaker for me. When I went to view this, I assumed that it was going to be pretty poor, but actually having looked at it, having felt it, it's a lot better than I thought. And I thought I was going to hate the pleather seats in the exclusive model, but they're actually far better quality than they've got any right to be. And you don't always get real leather even in premium cars, so I don't think it should put you off, and I think you should at least go and have a look at one before you discount it. Hardly anybody buys the lower spec SAIC model, but it is a couple of grand cheaper if you're willing to lose the panoramic roof and the heated seats and reverse camera and heated mirrors and stuff. You can get into that, and it's still got a decent enough equipment level. It's a couple of grand cheaper. Like I say, I don't think they sell very many, but there we go. Anyway, that's enough waffle. Let's have a drive, see what it's like. I think like any electric car, the first thing you're going to notice is how quiet it is. So losing out the engine noise is definitely a lot quieter experience. These cars have a pedestrian warning system fitted, which makes a kind of strange noise below about 20 miles an hour to stop you from running people over that aren't expecting you to be there. So you can hear that when you're rolling around town, but apart from that, it's a fairly quiet experience. And I think that is actually a pretty essential thing as we move to more and more electric cars on the road. My overwhelming memory of that being dangerous, the lack of noise being dangerous, is I was driving an Auris hybrid that I'd rented, and I went into the rental return place at Heathrow Airport to hand it back, but I didn't know where the nearest petrol station was, and I sat there, wasn't helping me find one, so I stopped in there to ask one of the members of staff where the nearest petrol station was, and he told me, and as I set off again, someone stepped out in front of me because they weren't expecting me to be moving, because obviously you go there to drop your car off, and they couldn't hear an engine or anything, and a full-on emergency stop came very, very close to running this guy over, and it was terrible, but it definitely shows you the danger of being quite as silent as you are in an electric car. So I think this move to fit pedestrian warning systems is definitely a good thing. So yeah, I've done about 500 miles in this since I got it so far. It's been pretty plain sailing. A couple of minor quality issues which I'll get the dealer to look at some point. You get the odd rattle from the A-pillar trim in the front, but I think it's just teething problems, and I've read online that other owners have had similar issues and they've had the dealer sort them out pretty straightforwardly. I mean, I imagine they take them off and put a little bit of felt tape on them to shut them up a little bit, tighten them up a little bit. I mean, that's all any manufacturer does if you go back with rattling trim issues, so it's not exactly high on my priority list. Everything else seems absolutely fine. It runs and drives as it should, and it charges and all that stuff, so to have a little bit of trim and rattle in a bottom of the market car from a up and coming manufacturer, I don't really think it's a problem. I think some people complain of a lot worse in a Tesla Model 3 that costs twice what this costs, so I'm not too worried at the moment. All in all, it's a fairly competent car. It's comfortable, it's quiet, and the electric drivetrain just seems absolutely brilliant. They really have nailed it. It's responsive, and it goes like shit off a shovel when you want it to, like most EVs do. You got that instant sort of thump of power when you want it, but when you just want to cruise around as well, it's fairly easy to do that. And then the regenerative braking makes you barely even need to use the service brake as well. It's just, I think anybody that hasn't driven an electric vehicle won't get it, but anybody that has totally will get it, that it's just a totally different driving experience. And it's not going to set your world on fire, it's not going to excite you really, but how many of you driving around in a 4-cylinder diesel can tell me that it's actually an exciting experience? I mean, I had the 3 Series diesel before this, which people will tell me is, you know, that's about as good as it gets. It's about all the car you'll ever need, but it doesn't excite you, does it? It's not an exciting car. It's quite interesting seeing the sort of rise of MG. You know, they were very much, when the new brand came back and launched and basically launched a bunch of lackluster petrol cars, they were laughed at, and you know, who bought them, I don't know. Who's buying the petrol MG3 or ZS? Not really sure, to be honest with you, but the EV seems to be pretty popular. There's a very recent article saying that a shipment of cars arrived in Bristol, and you know, out of a couple of thousand cars, more than half of them were electric, and they will have either been sort of the ZS EV or the MG5 EV, which has just been launched. And I think it's definitely the logical way forward for them. They've demonstrated that they can produce a half decent product at a price point that appeals in the market, and I think they're going to shift loads of them. I honestly think this car is really important as the sort of car that's going to be the step change to shift people to electric motoring. You can currently get these on nil advance payment on Motability, and I think that alone is going to drive people, probably some people that don't actually do that many miles in a petrol car, and would be perfectly suited to having an EV, especially one with a range like this one has, you know, 140 miles sort of real world range, and they can, you know, shift off of doing those kind of round town miles in a petrol or diesel car. And I think that being at this price point and it's really going to open up electric motoring to the masses. I think once these big fleets like Motability can start supplying them on favourable terms, that there's no stopping them. And you know, it could be the kick up the arse the other car manufacturers need to start producing more affordable products as well. I know with MG, you know, we've got the economies of Chinese manufacturing, but you can't possibly tell me that the other big players like Volkswagen, Ford, etc. haven't got access to the same kind of, you know, production volumes, buying power, just because of the number of cars that they currently produce. And I'm definitely of the opinion that it's actually the desire to keep making loads of money off of internal combustion engine cars, you know, where the profit margins are definitely higher, that's leading to still seeing a bunch of expensive electric cars, you know, 30-40 grand plus electric cars that actually they probably could be cheaper, but the manufacturers are trying not to alienate sales of their internal combustion engine cars. But I don't think MG need to worry too much about that, because their internal combustion engine cars aren't that popular and are, to be honest, a bit crap. They can go in at this price point, because actually if they switch to selling 100% EVs, then it's great, isn't it? Because they're, I imagine, still making a decent profit on them, and ultimately they'll be shifting more units than they were before. So I think it's win-win, but I think the other manufacturers could do well to take note and try and keep up with that. I think Volkswagen are going the right way with the ID.3. Certainly they're pitching that at quite an aggressive price point compared with the stuff from the Korean manufacturers, you know, the Kia e-Niro and the Hyundai Kona, which they're quite strongly priced. I think Volkswagen are trying to give them a run for the money there, but time will tell. Speaking of electric vehicles, we'll address some of the common questions. So yeah, like I said, about 140 miles real world range, 163 quoted. I guess if you drive really gently, don't use any of the auxiliaries, you'll be able to, you know, increase that, beat that figure. They claim something silly like 250 miles around town range. I guess maybe if you're using one as an Uber in London, you know, where you're averaging about 5 miles an hour, you might be able to see something like that. I don't know. Certainly, I definitely don't do driving that would be compatible with that where I am. But yeah, pretty healthy range really, especially for the money. Charging, it's got Type 2 and CCS connectors, so you can charge it on a Type 2 AC 32 amp socket in about, I don't know, 6 hours, something like that, from empty to full. So your kind of typical home wall box charger, that would be what you'd be looking at, or destination chargers like you'll find in like Tesco car parks or work car parks, stuff like that. And then CCS rapid charging, a charge from 20% to 80% in like 40 minutes. You know, it supports up to 76 kilowatt charging, although I've heard a lot of reports that you won't actually see that. some people actually say these charge quite slowly on CCS, but I've only ever rapid charged it once at Instavolt, and it was pulling sort of 40 odd kilowatts, so I can't really say that I think the charging's particularly bad, but I've seen mixed reports on that. Top speed of this car, 87 miles per hour apparently. Not of course that I've ever felt the need to get there, because that would be illegal. I've seen people poking fun at that, like, oh, what's that all about, even the smallest petrol engine car I'll get up to a ton, and is it relevant? I'm not sure it's relevant. People wax on about top speeds and 0 to 62 times like we're in a game of top trumps, but in real life it's not exactly that important, is it? And certainly what I will say is, in terms of performance and stuff, it's definitely adequate. It's 0 to 60 in about 8 seconds, a lot faster than a petrol engine one of these would be. And certainly now we're on the motorway, we're doing 70 miles an hour, and it's got plenty more to give should you want to break the speed limit, but it's perfect for driving on the motorway now. Obviously driving at these speeds you are going to impact the range a little bit. I think long runs at 70 plus you're probably going to see a decent reduction in the range, but that's sort of a trade-off that you need to make with most electric cars. The faster you drive them, the quicker the battery will drain. That's just kind of a fact of life. Just like the faster you drive a petrol car, the more fuel you use. The only reason you notice it as much as in an EV is because you've got a smaller battery or a smaller fuel tank, smaller range to begin with. That the X5 I've just got rid of, if you do 80 on the motorway, you're going to be doing sort of 15, 16 miles to the gallon. If you say 60, 65, you're going to do 26, 27 miles to the gallon. It's a dramatic difference, and it's no different in an electric car either. I think on the whole, unless you are regularly doing really long journeys, you don't really need to worry about it, as long as you can either get where you're going and back in one journey and charge when you get home again, or you can charge wherever you're going, destination charging, then how economical it is not actually of that much concern to you. So we're absolutely loaded up with safety equipment in this car as well. So I think the petrol engine of this didn't do particularly well in the in-cab safety test, because it was missing a load of the electronic safety aids, your lane departure warning, blind spot assist, all that stuff. So as a result, this car's got absolutely all of it. You've got the little lights in the mirrors that flash at you if there's a car in your blind spot. You've got lane departure warning, which beeps at you if you get too close to the white line, which I instantly turned off in this car because it seems very, very sensitive, and I see a lot of people say that about the ZS EV. Don't need to be anywhere near the white line at all, and it's bonging at you because it thinks you're going to leave your lane. So yeah, that's a bit pony, but certainly got all the safety equipment you could want. Autonomous emergency braking, rear cross traffic warning, all that kind of stuff. It's absolutely loaded with it, and for some people that's great. Some people, I couldn't have a car with all that crap, and myself, I'm kind of indifferent to it. Some of it's good, some of it's worth having, some of it's a bit of an annoyance, but thankfully through the menu on the infotainment system you can turn a lot of it off, so it's up to you how much of that you use. Probably its party trick is the MG Pilot, sort of semi-autonomous driving, which I don't think you get in any car at this kind of price point. It just doesn't tend to exist. But what that is basically it's a combination of the adaptive cruise and the lane keep assist and stuff. When you turn it on, and there's a stalk down here for the controls, the cruise control. You pull it forward twice like in a Tesla, and it engages MG Pilot, which both will keep you at the speed you've set, it'll keep you in your lane, and when you indicate, it'll let you change lane and all that kind of stuff. It's not full autonomous driving by any stretch of the imagination. It's not even close to even what Elon Musk considers to be autonomous driving, which, as we know, is maybe not quite the full story. But it's certainly a pretty competent aid for driving on the motorway. It'll keep you in lane, it'll keep you at constant speed, and I think if you were doing long runs at night and stuff, it would definitely be good for your fatigue levels. And it seems pretty good. I read somewhere that it's actually a Bosch system, it's Bosch hardware, the software that they've used for this, which was quite surprising really, that they've gone with one of the big boys. But maybe from a product liability point of view, it's a bit easier to use something that's sort of tried, tested and trusted than to try and homebrew. So, but then I guess maybe to be taken seriously in the Western market, they've got to employ some of the sort of well-known suppliers. I noticed this has got Michelin tyres fitted to it, and I was really shocked at that. Even your Kia and Hyundai come with, Korean brand tyres on. I was really surprised to find that this had Michelin's and not some Chinese rubbish. One massive criticism I've got of the adaptive cruise and the MG Pilot is that it doesn't use the regenerative braking. If it needs to slow you down, it uses the friction brakes. And the last I heard, MG were trying to work with Bosch to resolve that, but that was quite a while ago. I saw someone saying that on one of the Owners Club forums, and nothing seems to have come of it since then, so I don't know. So there we are then. That's a brief introduction to the MG ZS EV. Let me know in the comments if there's anything in particular you want to see from this series of videos, because what I'd like to do is use the opportunity to both dispel some of the myths. The people that have never seen or driven one of these, talk about them. It's quite a lot of people out there with a lot of hate for the reborn MG and Chinese cars in general. I'd like to address some of that stuff, but I'd also like to address some of the crap that's talked about them by some owners who think they're the best thing since sliced bread. There's absolutely no doubt they've definitely got some shortcomings. But that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like, share and subscribe if you like what you've seen, and I'll see you on the next one.